Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again. On this morning, I will share with you not so much a sermon as a story. It's a story about my father, my cat, and my first church, and the footprints that each has left with me. It's a story about love and loss and about honoring. And perhaps during the service, footprints that have touched you may come to mind, and you might take note of that. For the opening words, I have some words by Megan McDonough, who is from the Whole Being Institute. She says, "You have your own footprints that are being created right now. They're being created every moment of your life. Your footprints in the world are being created every time you take a breath, every time you make a choice, every time you smile, and every time you frown. Take comfort in the fact that even though you might not know where you're going or even how you got here, where you are contains your divine footprint."
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Berkeley, Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Don Close, and I'll be your worship associate today. No matter who you are, or how you make your living, no matter whom you love, or how you experience the sacred, we hope you will feel welcome among us, welcome in the fullness of who you are. Everyone is invited to stay after the service and make your way across the atrium for lunch and conversation. As is our practice, a gift to ourselves and each other, be our guest for lunch. If there's something in your heart that you would like lifted up in our service, there is a memory book at the back of the sanctuary where you can write a joy or sorrow that will be read aloud. You're welcome, always welcome, to simply light a candle there for a silent memory or prayer. We don't have our typical programs for children and youth during the summer season, but kids are most welcome to stay in the service, and childcare is available. Today, we welcome to our pulpit Reverend Dr. Jeannie Foster. Reverend Jeannie is Professor Emeritus of Literature and Creative Writing at St. Mary's College of California and a former minister of the Modesto Unitarian Universalist Church. At UUCB, she sings in the choir and is a former worship associate. She is a writer and translator of poetry and prose, including her most recent book, Your Form Became My Own, published in 2023. She has received numerous international recognitions for her poetry, for example, in her book, Selected Poems, translated into Italian and to be published in 2025 in Italy. Among her other writings is a critical work titled A Music of Grace, which sparks my curiosity. It asks the question, is there still sacred ground to stand on? She's looking forward to returning to Italy in September for the first time since the pandemic. Her passion is ballroom dancing, and in particular, ballroom dancing in Tuscany. She has made available 2 of her poetry books that will be on a table in the atrium for purchase after the service, and the proceeds will be donated to the church. Reverend Jeannie, we're thrilled to have you back at the pulpit. Now please rise in body or spirit to sing our opening song, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky, number 203 in the gray hymnal. The words will be on the screen.
All creatures of the earth and sky, come kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Swift rushing winds so wild and strong, white clouds that sail in heaven along. Alleluia, alleluia. Fair rising morn in praise rejoice. High stars of evening find a voice. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Cool flowing water, pure and clear, make music for all life to hear. Alleluia, alleluia. God's flame of fire so strong and bright, and bless us with your warmth and light. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Embracing earth you day by day, bring forth your blessings on our way. Alleluia, alleluia. All herbs and fruits that richly grow, let them the glory also show. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. All you of understanding heart, forgiving others, take your part. Alleluia, alleluia. Let all things now the holy bless, and worship God in holiness. Alleluia, 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 alleluia.
As we begin our service, we remind ourselves that our church occupies land in Huchiun, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. May we have the courage and humility to do our part to restore what has been broken, and the wisdom to live into a new solidarity with indigenous communities and with the earth. Now with Don Paulridge, let us light our chalice flame with these words provided by Reverend Jeannie. We light the chalice this morning in honor of those who have gone before us and have left their footprints on our hearts and souls. Now would you join me in saying our covenant? Love guides this church The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
I have 3 short poems of my own for the reading this morning. One is focused about my father and his footprints on me, one about my mother and her footprints, and the third about my cat and his footprints on me. The first is called Fencing. You had to hold your head just right to slip the mask over the top, the padded brace along the back curved to fit the skull. I loved the smell of metal mixed with sweat and oil. I loved looking through the tiny squares of hard black screen mounted like a featureless face toward the other dancing bird who also had outgrown his cage, and hearing his voice come back, steady with instruction. Already we had put on the padded muslin breastplate over the head and tied in back at the waist. He taught me to hold the foil between 2 fingers, fingers facing upward, wrist flexible and loose for parry and thrust. The left elbow bent at the right angle, the hand up behind my head. Bend your knees, he said. He taught me to lunge, aiming the capped tip for the heart. Mostly he touched me. The willowy foil tickled, bending me double with laughter. That was before I grew the chest and jaw of death, divorce, and the 1,000 other ways I would lose faith in the breastplate of love. If I could laugh again the way I laughed when my father shouted, "Touché!" and touched my heart, bent double with the sobs, I could stand again in a body of love. Much of today's service will be honoring my father, and I hope to have a service sometime before too long honoring my mother. Here's a poem by her in which, again, I think that this poem indicates her footprints and how they affected me. It's called Painting a Still Life with My Mother. We painted at the dining room table, each with our own paper, a parallel concentration. And as the vase was doubly recreated, a current flowed between us of presence, ease, and pleasure. On paper, the deep mauve bulb of the vase in a wash of color stretched its long neck, the line between air and glass almost lost at the hint of lip. Something like the way the great blue wading bird we saw yesterday at Tamales Bay leaned into flight. What I want to say, Mother, is that certain moments take, the way a vaccination or a permanent wave or a dye or a campaign or a seed or a root or a flame or an idea takes in a child's heart. They remind the child that she is safe. They remind the child that she is good. And the third poem, written for my cat, Dove, known as Dovey. My old cat my young old cat. My young old cat, asleep beside me. I, unable to sleep, play with a front paw. The soft firmness of the pads, feeling the space between the pads, slipping my finger between each toe. Still asleep, he spreads the space between each toe wider, as if he knows instinctively how to help me. Thank you. What's next here? Music for reflection. Thank you. Please join me now in a time for centering and a time for silence. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Open your heart. Now is a safe time. This is a safe place to be tender. During our time of silence, I invite you to hold in your hearts joys and sorrows, cares and concerns, challenges that you or those in your thoughts may be experiencing. Or, if you wish, simply let the silence take you where it takes you. Let us join together for a few moments of silence. Spirit of life that connects each of us to all. Hold in your wide embrace the joys and sorrows, cares and concerns of each of us. Let us know that we are not alone. In this community of care and witness, we hold one another in the seasons of our lives. We acknowledge the joys and the pains that weave our lives together. And we lift up what has been written in our memory book today. Longtime member Helene Knox passed away last Sunday, August 4. Lois Atkinson, dear friend, let us know. Please sign our card today for Ann Riley, who had a stroke, and for Ginger Frederick, who has a new knee. Your support means so much. And Richard Hanway's father entered hospice last week. Richard will be going out to Florida soon to be with him. For all that has been spoken aloud and all that yet remains in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, may we know that what is held by each of us here is held in the larger, loving embrace of our community and by a greater love that holds us all. Please remain seated while we sing a meditative hymn, Spirit of Life. It's number 123 in the gray hymnal, but the words will be on the screen. And I encourage you to try singing it as a prayer.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
A summer of footprints. On this morning, as I said before, I will share with you not so much a sermon as a story. A story about my father, my cat, and my first church, and the footprints they've left with me. It is a story of love and loss, and also a story of honoring each of these three: father, church, cat. This spring and summer, I felt like I was walking in a labyrinth, disoriented, lost, alone, even though Alan and friends were with me. Alone, but I had to keep walking. I was in my hometown of New Orleans. While there, I was in a constellation of events, each one by itself, though difficult, manageable. Together, they were overwhelming. So I love New Orleans. It has put its footprint on me, as it has on so many others who have gone away and been called back by that city. The ancient oak trees with limbs that reach all the way across the street. The lazy afternoons, jazz and jazz and jazz. The French Quarter, food and food and food. And of course, the Mississippi, that old man river who just keeps rolling along. I even went so far as to buy a second home. The pull was so strong. When I was a child living there, I didn't have much to do with religion. I didn't go to church. And I think that might have led to my searching for meaning from a very young age. I wondered where my little friend Betsy went when she went to Sunday school. and why my little friend Melanie said they didn't dance or sing in her church because God said that worship should be unadorned. New Orleans is a Catholic city, and the nuns who had big white flying hats on scared me. I thought they were witches. And I was especially upset when I had to fill in forms that had little boxes marked for each thing. And there was one marked for religion, and I didn't have anything to put in there. My questions led my father, a truly Renaissance man, who always said he got more spirituality from the arts than from any organized religion. He began to look around for a church where he felt he could be comfortable. He discovered First Church, Unitarian of New Orleans. I was in about, I think, the 7th grade, and now I was happy because I had something I could put in that empty space. But I want to stop right now for a minute and say a few words about the history of First Church, New Orleans. First of all, it is one of the oldest Unitarian churches in the United States, although a lot of people from New England don't believe that. The first minister was Dr. Theodore Clapp, C-L-A-P-P. He was born in 1792. He began his ministry in 1821 in New Orleans as a Presbyterian minister. His preaching is said to have drawn thousands. When he had a change in inner conviction and began to preach universal salvation, he was excommunicated for heresy by the presbytery. So he decided to form a new church, and the majority of the followers went with him. The church was known popularly as Parson Clapp's Church, or Church of the Strangers. In 1837, a delegation from Boston visited and decided to list the church in the official directory under the name First Unitarian Church, New Orleans. Parson Clapp and his congregants left their footprint on the city of New Orleans in many important ways. He was involved in the founding of Tulane University. Parson Clapp was involved in the creating of Touro Hospital, a major hospital to this day, and in setting up Touro Free Library. It is reported that when after he retired about 20 years after he began, and then in 1867, after 10 years of retirement, he died. And it's reported that literally thousands attended his funeral. It was in 1867. So I'm giving you such detail so that you can perhaps have a sense of the dismay I felt when I arrived in New Orleans last May, and found out that the congregation had just sold the church building, that building, because of inability to maintain it. They could not afford to live in that, use that building anymore. And I was told that I would be one of the last speakers in that church building. As part of saying goodbye to the church, they would like me, I was told, to speak about First Unitarian Church as it was when I was young. So back then, the church was in a different Frank Lloyd Wright-ish building, just a few blocks down the street from that church, which they bought later. At the time that I became involved with the church and my father became involved, it was a time of tension and unrest. The First Church stood up for integration. I believe my father was board president when the church was bombed. And a Molotov cocktail was thrown under the house of the then minister, Reverend Albert Dorlando. Albert Dorlando was thank goodness, I don't think he was the one who removed it, but someone removed it before it went off. But it was right under, apparently, the oil tank of his church, of his house. At that time, the Reverend Orlando was called before the HUAC, House Un-American Activities Committee. And they claimed that he was a communist, although he never was. And my mother tells me that she was quick to pick up the phone when it rang in order to protect me from hearing angry hate calls, claiming my father was a in lover and a communist. Despite all this disruption, I was happy. I had found a happy home in First Church, my first church. I was in the LRY, sang in the choir, was invited by the minister to read a poem in the service. I read Ode to a Grecian Urn by Keats. And I had a part in a play about Parson Clapp. It was a critical time in my life, and I had found a place where I could be myself, a place that appreciated my talents and gave me a chance to use them and share them with others. All of which were the beginnings of and groundwork for the pursuit of ministry. With this incredible history, old and more recent, I feel deeply saddened by the plight of First Church Unitarian Universalist, New Orleans, now. The congregation does have a plan and a determination to move forward, and an exceptional lay leader as president, moving them onto a temporary home in a Methodist church not far away. While I was there in May, as well as saying goodbye, everyone was packing up and making plans for storage. There was actually a sale of all kinds of books and glasses and everything else you can think of in way of getting ready to move. So for me, it was really the first time I had truly experienced the monumental affection that that congregation has for my father. He was revered by many who had never had the chance to meet him. He was the incredible man who built by hand the beautiful altar table at the front of the sanctuary. Not quite this large, but maybe prettier, maybe more beautiful. When they were talking about storing things, most of the people in the congregation did not like the idea of having the altar table that my father built stored away in some dusty, dark storage place. The table, I guess, had become really a sign of something very, very important for that congregation. There it is. That's my father's altar table. He built that by hand, just an evidence of another one of his many talents. The altar table had stood waist deep in Katrina and survived. My father was also director of the choir at the church, composer of music for a church celebration, painter of portraits of members, restorer of stained glass windows saved from the original Gothic-style church. There have been actually 6 buildings of that church, starting with Parson Clapp's first church. And how much more my father did, no one knows. My father had left his footprints all over this building and the one that had gone before, this smaller Frank Lloyd Wright-ish building. Quite a change from Frank Lloyd Wright, to that. We don't have the churches up there, but a very, very different kind of church. At the very moment that I had a real sense I was truly impacted by by the love of the congregation for my father, at that very moment, I watched the church being shut down. It had been sold. It is a crime, I thought, if this church with such a long and rich history is lost. A great sadness has settled over me, a fear that the entire congregation, which is the church, will be lost. So with all the packing and storing, the focus settled on my father's altar table. So many people told me how beautiful it is, how much they loved it. They didn't want to have it stored for who knows how long in a dark, dismal storage space. It's too beautiful to be locked in the dark without light, without air, one woman told me. The ripple effect of my father's footprints on others long after his death in 2004 was brought home to me in a way I had never understood before. Footprints can continue to live in the hearts and souls of others long after we are no longer here, and we may never know who or how we touch others. About this time, my father's footprints made another surprise appearance. I received an email from a person named Kirk, who is an antique furniture restorer living in Daphne, Alabama. He wrote this email to me asking me, or telling me that he had been given a trunk, a clothing trunk, that had been in a barn for some 30 years. And he was asked to restore it. It had a scene of the local surroundings painted on the outside of the trunk, and on the inside, the name Foster. So he had found my name And my father's doing quite a bit of research. He found a Charles C. Foster in a New Orleans folk art registry. And he found my name in my father's obituary in the Times-Picayune. So he was asking in his email if this man was my father. The long and short of it is that I drove to Daphne, Alabama, to see the trunk. There it is. It turns out that my father was in the CCC, that is the Civilian Conservation Corps, when he was about 20. Each member was given a trunk to keep their belongings in. This was my father's trunk. Kirk loves it. He wants to keep it. He's not about to sell it. And if the Antiques Roadshow ever comes to a nearby town, he's planning to take that trunk and see what the value is, I guess. He's so proud of it. Again, my father's footprints have a way of showing up in unexpected places and making a difference. In the meantime, after my trip and so on to Daphne, I got an idea about storing the altar table. There it is. The idea that I got was to store it for at least 2 years. That's the length of time the congregation thinks it will need to find another real location for themselves, at least 2 years. So I decided that I could store it for at least 2 years in the little cottage that I had bought in New Orleans. So there's a very large entry room that had almost no furniture in it. In fact, the whole house has almost no furniture in it. And so I felt that the altar table could fit there. And I think it looks very beautiful. So I became the caretaker of my father's altar table. I was a caretaker of his footprint, in a way. And now for the hardest, and I'm still crying. I took my beautiful golden cat, Dove, with me on the Summer of Footprints. He had flown with me to New Orleans 2 times before, and he was a very good traveler, and it worked out just fine. But he was older. He had been with me in my animal companion for 19 years. He remembered the house in New Orleans, and he seemed to be doing okay for a while. And I'm afraid I didn't pay enough attention. I didn't notice that he was getting thinner. He was still eating, and he had that certain sparkle in his eye. He was on a medication that the vet in Berkeley had given him for anemia. And when I took him to a very good vet in New Orleans, I learned that the medication had quit working, and that an alternative medication didn't work either. He also had arthritis. I was busy trying to write the sermon and trying to work out the delivery of the altar table to my house. I didn't take in that he was having more and more trouble walking, and eventually he quit walking. He couldn't walk anymore. He became bedridden, and I didn't want to let him go. So I cried a lot. When the sermon was over and done, that night, he slept alongside me in bed, and I kept peeking under the bed covers to make sure he was warm and comfortable. It was a long, peaceful night of sleep. And when the morning light came through the windows and woke me up, I felt sure Dove was feeling better. I was sure he was feeling better. When I lifted the covers, he was unable to lift his head. He was peaceful. We did have a peaceful night of sleep, and he was dying. A vet from the lap of love came to the house and gave him the final shot. And I was holding him close to my heart. She took him away. Several days later, he came back to me in a beautifully carved box, about that size. I brought him back to his home in Berkeley and made a memorial for him. And there it is, the little box in the front. A ceramic bowl of his fur I had been keeping whenever I brushed him. His brushes are there. His dove collar, which actually had a dove flying on the collar. Carrying cards sent to me, lilies. His footprint preserved in that round clay-like cake. And the card from the New Orleans vet with a drawing of a cat on the cover and inside a single line, "I'm still here." We all have our own footprints, ours alone. Some in sand, each and all of their own footprints in the world, Footprints and their rippling effects remain after we're gone, as evidence of someone's or something's presence. They don't have to come in the shape of a foot. There are figurative kinds of footprints. They can come as a cat's paw, or a building like a church, or music, or artwork, or a word. But no footprints are lost in this interdependent web of existence. And we may never know when or how our footprints touch another and make a difference. The Japanese poet Basho, 17th century poet who was a master of the haiku, said on the Festival of All Souls, quote, "Never think of yourself as someone who didn't count." You may sometimes feel like you're walking in a labyrinth, disoriented, lost, alone, overwhelmed, but you have to keep walking. You may feel, as I sometimes do, that I'm not making any difference. Or like the poet James Wright, who was my mentor, said at the end of a poem, "I've wasted my life." But in those times, remember the words of Basho, a 17th century Japanese poet. Never think of yourself as someone who doesn't count. Never think of yourself as someone who doesn't count. Where you are contains your divine footprint.
We invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. It is a time for the offering. Instead of passing the plate, you can give electronically by scanning the QR code in the back of your badge, or you can put a cash or check donation into the envelope that you can find in the back of the pews. Each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization recommended by our Social Justice Council. Thank you for so much practicing generosity with the church and with our good neighbors. Our good neighbor for this month is East Bay Housing Organization. This organization mobilizes the power and wisdom of their members to produce, preserve, and protect affordable housing opportunities for low-income communities in the East Bay. Thank you.
For the offertory music, we are going to listen one work by Charles C. Foster. It's his Sonatina for piano, and it's an 8-minute video in which you'll hear the whole work. Sonata usually is a form that is built upon 3 or 4 different movements that describe different states of psyche or mind or ideas. They are contrast, and they run in contrast, something like slow, fast, or loud, quiet. And Sonatina is a more cohesive yet simplified version of sonata, where all different segments and all different states of mind or psyche are combined in one whole. And so we now will be listening and seeing some of the artwork of Charles Foster and following the footprint that he left to this world.
Please join me now in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. It's really been good being together today, and I want to thank Reverend Jeannie for reminding us how we are touched and touched so many others in our lives. I want to remind you to check out our website, uuc.org, uucd.org, and you can find the week ahead there, the newsletter, find out everything that's going on. I have 4 announcements today. First, there are just 4 days left through August 14th to join the Social Justice Council's fundraiser, our annual Congrats to Grads program, to support UUCB youth who have graduated from high school and are going on for their next adventures. You can contribute at the Social Justice Council table in the atrium. I think Helen Tinsley Jones will be there. Second, UUCB's second annual upscale rummage sale is happening on Saturday, August 31st from 11 to 3 p.m. This event is perfect for anyone who considers themselves a treasure hunter, vintage lover, or earth defender. Number 3, come to the Chalice Circle open house and informal session Sunday, August 25th, 12:30 to 2. This is an opportunity to find out what Chalice Circles are all about, how to join one, how to be a facilitator. Enjoy a warm and welcoming get-together for information on how to shape future Chalice Circles. Finally, next Sunday, August 18th, is our in-gathering water communion worship service. Reverend Marcus will be back to lead our first service of the new church year, an occasion not to miss. Reverend Marcus invites everyone to bring water, in a little container of some kind, of course, to partake in the ceremony. Water representing somewhere or something that has nourished your spirit or made you feel more alive this summer. Oh, and P.S., please sign the super cards in the atrium. Now please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing song, There's a River Flowing in My Soul, number 1007 in the teal hymnal. The words will be on the screen.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my
yourself as someone who doesn't count.